Welcome back to Philosophy and Ethics in Games, the series where I break down the choices in some of our favorite games and figure out which decision is the right one. I'm Josh Bearheart Hawk, and today we're diving back into TellTale Games' The Walking Dead Season 2, looking at Episode 3. In case you missed Season 1 or any of the other previous episodes, I've linked a playlist in the description below. As I continue to break down the series, I'll add new videos to the playlist so you can find them all in one place. Episode 3 is titled In Harm's Way, and we start out with what may be the most peaceful opening in the entire series, as Clementine is staring blankly at a tree in a quiet forest. It turns out she's more enamored with the Hermit Sphinx Moth resting on the trunk of the tree than the tree itself. As she reaches up to touch the moth, it flies away, and we hear a voice break through the peace asking,
"You about done over there?"
It's the voice of Troy, one of Carver's men, and the response comes from a flustered Sarah who's just finished using the restroom. It's unclear how long it's been since the end of episode 2, but as Clem and Sarah approach the back of the nearby box truck, we can hear Carver on a radio letting his main group know that they're about 30 minutes away from home. This is where you can have your first real interaction with Carver, as he scolds you for staring and eavesdropping on his conversation. It's clear he's not in a good mood, and he can even threaten to hurt Clementine if she steals his walkie-talkie. This might be a throwaway line, or foreshadowing. As Clem and Sarah climb back into the box truck, we see the rest of the group tied up and miserable. Kenny seems to be relieved that Clementine wasn't hurt, making us wonder what exactly led to this stop on the road. The implication is that Sarah needed to use the restroom, but based on what we see, it seems odd that Carver would stop the trip just for that when they're so close to the compound. As the drive starts back up, Kenny starts trying to rally everyone against Carver, saying they need to free themselves and be ready to fight when they reach their destination. As noble as that idea is, this is one of those times where it's better to wait and see. It's becoming more and more clear that Carver isn't one to be trifled with, and the idea that they would somehow be able to overpower an unknown force when the back of the truck opens again is laughable at best. After a little back and forth, Kenny uses a broken railing to cut himself free and prepares to fight. But the idea is short-lived as the truck hits something, causing Kenny to slam face first into the back door and fall down. As Sarita is scrambling to check on him, the door opens and the group finds themselves being escorted out onto the dock as Carver's voice rings out over the PA system to let everyone know that the group that ran away has returned. Everyone except Carlos, who's being pulled away to help with some unknown issue, is led to an outdoor area where they're told they need to get some rest before what will inevitably be a long day tomorrow. This is where we meet some new folks and even catch a glimpse of a few familiar faces. Reggie is a man who tried escaping with the group when they fled. He'd been captured before even getting out of the area, and he apparently lost an arm not long after while working on the wall. We also get a glimpse of a man named Mike, who seems rather irritated at all of the noise everyone in the group is making while he's trying to sleep. And we meet a woman sitting at a picnic table who seems to be eyeing the group with suspicion more than anything. Bonnie and Troy are the guards escorting the group, and we are reintroduced to Tavia, who is responsible for recruiting the survivors at the end of 400 days. Before the group can get too comfortable, Tavia tells Alvin that Carver wants to see him upstairs, and we're left to wonder whether we'll ever see him alive again. And now we really start to get a picture of who Carver is and what he's capable of. As the group talks to Reggie, it's clear that intimidation and manipulation are the main ways that Carver keeps people in line. Reggie is living day to day with the promise that doing just a little bit more might be his ticket to freedom. He's been imprisoned in the outdoor living area the whole time the group he tried to leave with was gone, told that he would be able to earn his way back inside over time. This has led to him following everything Carver says to the letter, and to defend the man even in light of clear wrongdoing. It's a form of operant conditioning, where the desired behaviors are subtly rewarded while the undesirable actions are harshly punished. Reggie is convinced that his actions, while in the community prison, have led to him being extremely close to being released. This is reinforced by Troy telling Reggie that if he's able to keep the new group in line, he'll be on the verge of getting out, and again by Carver the next morning when he tells Reggie that he's nearly back in. If he only follows the path a little longer, he'll be back with the main group. And the in-group versus out-group theme is thick with Carver. Even as Clementine and the others are being walked in, Carver is talking about how the people that fled are part of a group that simply lost their way, and how
no one needs to forget what they did, but we do have to find it in our hearts to forgive them.
They are not part of the group. They are more or less outsiders. By keeping them separate from the rest of the group, he further pushes this narrative that they are not us. Then he goes the extra mile and makes sure the people on the inside have plenty of food and other supplies, while the outside group barely scrapes by. He's creating haves and have-nots, and he's in control of who is part of each group. The group notices Reggie is missing an arm, and he explains that he lost it well after they'd all left. He was bitten by a zombie while working outside the wall, and he only survived because they removed his arm very shortly thereafter. We don't find out if Carver was involved in this decision or not, but if he was, it was likely his way of showing the kind of power he has through what he would have played as mercy. He could have just let the outsider, Reggie, die, but he chose to help him despite the prior betrayal. After introductions are made, Kenny urges Clementine to search around for a way out. While it's understandable that he would want to escape sooner rather than later, the rush to get out is a mistake. Like when they were in the back of the truck, they don't really know much about the situation. They know that Carver is ruthless and not to be trusted, but they don't know the extent of the security measures or the loyalty of anyone on the inside. Not to mention that, while things may be rough for them in the short term, they are safe in the makeshift prison and will have food and supplies to keep them going. As the morning rolls around, Clementine finds herself being kicked awake by Troy. Carver wants a word with the group about the herd of zombies that's bearing down on the compound, and he wants to address the tension everyone is feeling about being back and locked down. As he's in the middle of praising Reggie and calling him out as an example for how the group can get back in his good graces, another manipulation tactic, Sarah starts whispering to Clementine. This interruption doesn't go unnoticed, and Carver yells at Carlos to get his daughter in line. But he isn't alright with Carlos simply asking Sarah to apologize. He expects him to smack his daughter. If Carlos were to refuse, Carver promises Troy will do it instead, meaning Carlos has to choose between hitting the young girl or letting someone else do it. Notice that Carver doesn't partake in the violence in this instance, though. He doesn't threaten to do the beating himself, rather he puts someone else up to do it. This is because, by having someone else do it, he can shift the blame for harming the girl. He can play it off as Carlos or Troy being the violent one, while he simply made sure the rules were enforced. This is a common tactic for dictators and tyrants because it keeps their hands metaphorically clean. They can shift the blame for pain that was inflicted to others and justify their actions more easily while still using violence as one of the most effective tools in their arsenal. Once the situation with Carlos and Sarah is resolved, everyone is given their task for the day. Clementine is assigned to work with Bonnie in the armory. As they load magazines, Bonnie apologizes for how she acted at the lodge. She explains that she didn't know anyone would get hurt, and she feels like the whole thing was her fault for lying to them and directing Carver to the hideout. We also learn that she was supposed to leave with Luke's group, but changed her mind in the last minute because she didn't want to lose the relative safety and security that Carver seemed to have built. For all his faults, the compound seems strong enough to weather hordes, and they have more than enough food and supplies to get by. And that brings us to an interesting thought. Back in 400 Days, we dealt with a situation where we had to decide what to do with a woman who had tried to leave the camp we were in. She was trying to take supplies, but that was almost secondary when the idea came up that she might have wound up running into another group and sharing the location of the well-stocked place she'd run away from in the past. That situation has now come full circle in the form of Luke's group leaving Carver's group. We can easily put ourselves in Carver's shoes in that instance and think about how the group that was leaving could pose a threat to the massive amount of supplies in the compound. The state of the world being what it is, was Carver actually wrong to pursue them? This is a question that is separate from whether he is fit to be the leader of any group, or whether his way of running things is right or wrong. As we'll discuss in a bit, his leadership style is definitely bad, and that was most certainly the reason Luke's group left in the first place. But Carver would have no trouble making the case to those who remained about why they needed to be brought back. After all, what if they returned to steal supplies, maybe bringing with them a small, well-armed group? And I want to point out that I keep calling it Luke's group, because Bonnie makes it pretty clear that it was Luke and Carver who butted heads. We can piece together that both men likely wanted to be the leader of the group, and both had a faction in their corner. When push came to shove, Luke decided to take those who would follow him and split off, leading to the events that we see play out in this season. And now the picture of Carver is starting to become even clearer. He wants to be in control, and he doesn't like it when anyone challenges him. Luke was a threat to that control, but he had some support behind him, so Carver couldn't do much about it. When Luke and his biggest supporters left, it gave Carver the ammo he needed to bring those who remained, like Bonnie and Reggie, back in line. Using manipulation, like telling Reggie he's almost back in the main group, and reminding everyone how good they have it there, how he is the only one who can do the hard things and keep them safe, he's managed to improve his grip on power despite the brewing rebellion. But cracks do show through, as Bonnie seems to be questioning whether Carver will make the right choices for the group after seeing him shoot Walt at the lodge. Back in the moment with Bonnie and Clem only gets a short amount of time to load ammo, as Tavia shows up to escort her up to the greenhouse, where she reunites with Sarah and Reggie to work on picking berries. The task seems pretty straightforward, but it all goes sideways when Carver shows up to find that Sarah hasn't finished her lot, and immediately turns on Reggie. Within moments, Carver is pushing Reggie up to the edge of the building and shoving him off to his death. He justifies this murder by saying that Reggie was weak and incompetent, and uses the instance as an example of what will happen to those he deems too weak to be in the group, before sending Clem back down to help Bonnie. The whole thing seems almost like one big act. He's very over the top and dramatic about it, and it's clear that he wanted to send a message. Bonnie hands Clem a bucket and asks her to take it out to the guys working on the expansion, as Clementine relays what Carver did. The expansion isn't too far away, and Clem walks in to find Kenny trying to strangle Mike. He apparently didn't like that Mike was trying to tell him what to do, but before they can really settle things, a group of zombies comes bursting through the window. The three wind up fighting off the dead, with a little help from Troy, and Clem is instructed to head back to Bonnie again. But before she can return, someone grabs her from behind and pulls her into one of the stores. Doing her best to fight her attacker, she winds up biting the hand over her mouth before discovering that it belongs to Luke. He spent several days walking with barely any rest, and he's interested in helping the group escape once more. After explaining himself, he asks Clem to get him a radio and bring it back the next day. But that task moves to the back burner, as Clementine is caught exiting the store by Troy, who instructs her to go see Carver. After a brief run-in with the teary Rebecca, we make our way into Carver's office to find Alvin beaten unconscious. It's clear that Carver wanted to bring Alvin as much pain as possible, and if we linger too long, we're told that we'll be next if we don't fall in line. The conversation between Clem and Carver is intense to say the least. He makes it known that he is looking for a successor, and while he will eventually expect the baby Rebecca is carrying to be that, it's clear that he wants Clementine to fill a role in his plans. I'll pick apart Carver in depth in his Friend or Foe episode, but for the moment I want to really look at what he says to Clementine, because he's using a tactic to try to convince her that is often used by dictators and tyrants alike. If Clementine tells Carver that she doesn't think Reggie deserved to die, he responds by saying that Reggie did need to be killed. His justification is that Reggie has made several mistakes that put the group in danger, and he notes that sometimes an individual needs to be killed to protect the larger group. This is Carver using an argument that essentially amounts to the ends justify the means, while obfuscating his true intentions. Basically, he's justifying his actions as being for the greater good, and using them to try to convince Clementine that he is strong. In reality, this is what makes him such a weak leader. He wants people to fear him, to be afraid of what he might do if they don't stay on his good side. This form of leadership builds distrust and always winds up being the downfall of the person in charge, because the people they are supposedly leading become unhappy and begin plotting to either leave or overthrow the leader. This is what happened when Luke's group left the compound. The split between his group and Carver hit a breaking point, and they sought to escape. We know that Bonnie and Reggie were meant to go with them, and while Reggie has started to fall into Stockholm territory, Bonnie still actively doubts Carver, even though he doesn't know it. That's why leaders like Carver are doomed to fail. There's always dissent when you try to rule with an iron fist, and if Luke and his group are questioning Carver openly, and Bonnie is doing so in private, it's reasonable to assume that others are questioning as well. He can never really trust anyone. He'll always have to wonder if the people that tell him that they believe in him mean it, or if they're just saying it to stay in his good graces. Knowing that he can't trust anyone leads to an internal unraveling. He's slowly breaking mentally, seeing traitors where they don't exist and making rash decisions like killing Reggie in an attempt to show that he's still in control. The conversation with Clementine shows that he's desperate for some lifeline, and he works hard to convince her that she is like him. He builds her up, telling her that she's one of the strong ones while everyone else is weak. And even if she rebuts him, he uses it to show how strong she is for standing up to him when no one else would. This is also why it would be rather easy for Clementine to get in his good graces and betray him later on. He's so desperate for someone he can trust and manipulate that he leans into the young girl, assuming her incapable of betraying him because of how young and impressionable she seems. After finishing up with Carver, Clementine makes her way back to the pen with the others, finding them discussing the best way to escape the compound. Kenny is arguing that they should plan on escaping when the incoming herd of zombies hits, using them as cover, but everyone else wants to wait. Luke managed to pull Mike and Kenny aside after talking to Clem, relaying his plan to them as well, and the discussion eventually leads to a plan involving getting Luke a radio and trying to find a way through the herd with his help. That plan isn't without its own set of flaws, but as they are arguing about Kenny's lack of foresight, having no idea what to do when they reach the point of needing to walk through a herd of the dead, a new voice joins the conversation. The weird girl that Clementine noticed keeping to herself the day before, Jane, pipes up and shares an idea that grosses everyone out. They can just cover themselves in guts. After Clementine endorses the idea, relaying her experience leaving the Marsh house with Lee, the plan is set in motion, and Clem is sent to retrieve the radios. Once the radios are in hand, Clem sneaks back to the yard and grabs a little shut-eye before things really kick off. The morning light finds the group debating who is going to get the radio to Luke, with Clementine being ultimately selected no matter what choice you try to make. She's expecting to spend the day with Mike and Kenny in the yard, making the task a little more difficult, but she winds up with Bonnie instead. Bonnie reveals that she's having further doubts about Carver after hearing his side of what happened to Reggie, and she agrees to let Clem sneak off to find Luke. Making her way back out to the comic store, she quickly discovers the problem. Luke is nowhere to be found. Within moments, she's being assaulted by an angry Troy who leads her, Mike, and Kenny back to the holding pen where they learn that Luke has been captured. Carver lectures everyone about the world and how disappointed he is before demanding that they return the second stolen radio. That radio is in Clementine's pocket, but before she can speak up, Kenny intercepts it and confesses to the whole thing. It's clear his intention was to protect Clementine from whatever fallout might happen, but he also seems a bit surprised when Carver starts hitting him. The beating is brutal, and it's only interrupted when Bonnie steps in and tells Carver that there's a breach that requires his attention. Once Carver is gone, she says they all need to get ready and asks Carlos to do his best with Kenny, as they need to leave that night. Nightfall brings an anxious group, with an argument over whether to actually leave being the highlight. Luke is having second thoughts, even as Bonnie has promised to open the gate for them to escape as soon as she hears the PA system going. Kenny is still out cold, Sarita is grieving, Clem and Luke are both hurt, and Rebecca is still pregnant, which all goes into the reasons not to leave column. After a lot of back and forth, and not much progress, everyone's spirits are lifted as Kenny finally wakes up and insists he's good to go. The only effect the beating appears to have had on him, in the short term at least, is to strengthen his resolve. Clementine is tasked with getting to the PA system and turning it on. After accomplishing that, she is surprised by Alvin, who is barely alive, but ready to exact some bit of revenge on Carver. He manages to get a gun from the desk, using it to shoot one of Carver's men who'd come in to shut the PA system off as Clem climbs back out of the office. Making her way to the stockroom, Clem finds the group being held at gunpoint by Carver, and she channels her inner ninja, jumping down on him and giving the group the upper hand for once. Kenny shoots him in the kneecaps before grabbing a crowbar and telling the rest of the group to wait outside. Everyone, including Clementine, has to make their own choice about whether to leave the room or stay for what is about to happen. In reality, the best thing to do would be to put a bullet in Carver and leave. But Kenny is out for revenge, and Rebecca is right there with him. William Carver has done some bad things, and his method of ruling wasn't the best. But at the end of the day, beating him isn't going to solve anything. That kind of behavior is something you would expect to see from Carver himself, and dropping to that level destroys whatever humanity those involved might have left. Yes, he needs to be prevented from ever hurting anyone again, but as we've discussed in prior episodes, there has to be lines. Executing or exiling someone for stealing supplies or breaking the rules the group has set forth is one thing. Mercilessly beating someone is on a completely different level. For that reason, I have Clementine leave the room. It's the same reason I choose not to kill the St. John brothers as Lee, or finish off the Stranger at the end of Season 1. There are some lines that, once crossed, cannot be uncrossed. There are some actions that should never be taken if we want to keep some inkling of our humanity intact. Once Carver is dealt with, the group has to cover themselves in guts and start leaving the area. The biggest issue they have, however, isn't the dead, as the remaining members of Carver's group are on the roof of the building, shooting blindly into the herd in the hopes of killing enough zombies to make it through. One of them winds up hitting Carlos, setting into motion a series of events that involves the group scattering and ends with Sarita being bitten. The last decision of the episode is whether to kill the zombie that bit her or cut off her arm. To see the fallout, though, we have to wait until next week. Like I said earlier, I'm going to be covering Carver in the Friend or Foe series soon. He's often seen as one of the more interesting bad guys in the series, and it's easy to see why. On the surface, he seems very well put together, with a group of people around him willing to do some horrible things to stay alive. But people like Carver never actually win in the end. What did you think of this episode? There weren't a lot of choices to make that directly impacted the outcome, but the theme of this season has been subtlety, and we'll see how our interactions and decisions play out in the final 2 episodes as the fallout from our confrontation with Carver comes into play. For those of you that like early access to videos and behind-the-scenes stuff, I've got channel memberships and a Patreon. Channel memberships are available by clicking on a button that's somewhere around the video, and the Patreon can be found through a link in the description below. For now, I want to thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.